This is what most people think Singapore is like, a united and multiracial nation where everyone is able to coexist in harmony. But is that really the case? This is what Singaporeans think.
Chinese people do not consider the feelings of minorities.
People who are darker skinned or they have names that are not in Chinese, they get made fun of.
So people will feel like, why is it that, like only Chinese people get hired?
If you're a Malay that can speak Chinese, then I definitely feel that she deserves a chance.
It makes the non-Chinese feel very left out.
Singapore is known for being a multiracial society. More than that, one that lives in harmony. With four main racial groups of Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian, Singapore has managed to create a trademark and identity of a harmonious society that we as Singaporeans are proud of. However, beyond this cover of racial harmony made so familiar to the world and ourselves, is what we see really what is happening? In Singapore, the Chinese make up the majority of the population at 74.3%. We believe that being the majority brings with it undeniable advantages simply due to ethnicity, putting them at an edge in terms of job opportunities, language, and more, whether intentionally or not. Hence, the origin of the term Chinese privilege. In this documentary, we dive deep into the issue of Chinese privilege to present our reasons, street interviews, and expert opinions to prove why we believe that Chinese privilege is a prevalent issue in Singapore that needs to be addressed. We are told that we live in a meritocratic society where we will be acknowledged based on our merit and nothing else, such as race. Yet, in the education sector, that by right should provide an equal footing for all students, it is not the case.
The schools are definitely a form of privilege. Is it fair? Short answer, no. Because everyone in the country, regardless of race, regardless of community, pays towards the funding of these schools. But the people who can enroll in these schools are all who are able to speak Mandarin, who are able to learn Mandarin as a language. Whether it's second language, first language, it doesn't matter. So in that sense, everyone is paying towards one community's advancement.
But when and how did Chinese privilege even begin? We trace it back to Singapore's history. For as long as anyone can remember, the Chinese in Singapore have made up roughly 3/4 of the population. As the majority population, it is undeniable that the Chinese have and are still enjoying special treatment simply due to their ethnicity. During British rule, racial groups were established and racial stereotypes were highly popularized. Indians were portrayed as morally corrupt, Malays as lazy and unsophisticated, and Chinese as scheming and dishonest. This shaped independent Singapore's racial landscape, including its Chinese, Malay, Indian, other racial clarifications and stereotypes. Ever since independence in 1959, Singapore has had one ruling party, the People's Action Party or PAP, which is mostly made up of Chinese leaders. The party sought to re-Asianize Singapore through campaigns such as the Speak Mandarin campaign launched in 1979. The campaign had slogans like "Please speak Mandarin, your children's future is in your hands" in 1984, suggesting that the Chinese language was necessary and the standard for success. Although this campaign was targeted at Chinese Singaporeans, it makes one wonder why so much emphasis was placed on the Chinese language but little on other languages such as Tamil and Malay, despite Singapore being a multiracial society that claims to progress regardless of race and language. We decide to find out more by collecting primary evidence. All statistics have been rounded to the nearest whole number. In the survey done up by us, where 82% of respondents were Chinese and 18% were minority races, 64% of respondents said they knew of the existence of Chinese privilege, while 36% said they did not. 61% of respondents believed that Chinese privilege exists in Singapore, while 39% did not. This shows that even the majority race of Chinese believe that they do enjoy certain privileges over other races in Singapore. When asked if Chinese privilege is a problem that needs to be addressed, 43% of respondents said yes, while 29% said yes, but that it isn't of priority, and 29% did not think it was a problem to be addressed. Based on the survey done up by us, results collated based on 163 respondents prove that most people believe that Chinese privilege exists in Singapore and felt that it is a prevalent issue that needs to be discussed urgently, though there are still a significant number of those who think otherwise. We continue to dig for evidence to prove our claim, and several opinions from both Singaporeans and experts revealed more of what many Singaporeans are unwilling to admit. In order to find out more about the general perspective of Singaporeans on this issue, we conducted a street interview. Let's listen to some of their responses.
Layman terms is them being chosen before anyone else in anything.
There will be an unfair advantage when you compare to other races.
You will always be at the top of the priority list, no matter what you apply for and what you do.
The Chinese get more advantages in Singapore.
How in Singapore the Chinese are viewed as more privileged. Similar to white superiority, if I'm not wrong.
Chinese privilege is like white privilege. It's where Chinese people do not consider the feelings of minorities or don't understand like the minority struggle.
Yeah, it definitely exists in Singapore.
Not everywhere, but yes. We have to acknowledge the fact that there is such a problem in Singapore.
Yes.
I think so.
Definitely.
Chinese privilege exists, but not many people here know about it.
I do know that people do feel like, there is Chinese privilege. Like, like you go certain places, then they will converse with you in Mandarin and they'll be like taken aback.
I cannot say anything myself, to be honest. I've been living a relatively good life, and maybe unconsciously I've been benefiting of these privileges, but overall for me I haven't seen anything yet, or I haven't experienced anything that has sparked off my passion to fight for equality.
I think people should be more open-minded with different races in Singapore. I don't think there should be racial stereotype or people bad-mouthing certain races. I think everyone should be in unity.
So often when people are privileged, they don't actually realize that they have a privilege, which is the big problem here. And another thing is that I feel like everyone should be open-minded towards this. Like, having privilege isn't really a negative thing. Like, it isn't really like we're not making Chinese people like the bad people in the picture or something. It's just that we're just letting them know that they have privilege.
Just at one particular working place whereby even our team meetings were actually in Mandarin when I was the only Malay in our whole team.
A lot of the Chinese privilege that happens in Singapore is also very micro. Like, you don't realize it's happening, but it's happening within the surface. Like, for example, speaking Chinese in class. Like, let's say it's science class or science or math or something. Yeah. Your teacher starts speaking Chinese for Mandarin for no good reason, and all the non-Chinese speaking people are like, And then in our secondary school, right, our principal likes to speak Mandarin a lot. And then it makes the non-Chinese feel very left out, left out of discussion, left out of conversation.
It was awkward at one point of time because I was caught off guard. I didn't expect it, but I did have to interject, and I had to politely tell my supervisor that maybe he forgot about me. So if you could say the whole meeting in Mandarin first and then later on say back in English is fine with me.
This is what our experts have to say.
Honestly, yes, it does. It's just subtle enough for the majority to not notice this, but it's really obvious enough for those minorities like us to actually notice it.
Definitely, best example, this school that we are in, where only someone who is able to learn Mandarin as a mother tongue language is able to enroll. But beyond this particular setting, most social situations, chances are we will be speaking in at least some Mandarin, even if we are in a setting whereby there are friends of other races. So that in itself, it's a privilege because we understand the language, but they don't. Another way you will see it is in job opportunities, and Mediacorp's Channel 8 and Channel U are a very good example because they have the largest viewership of any television station here, except the cable TV channels from overseas. And most of the production, the hosting and the acting is all done in Mandarin. So if you're not able to speak the language, that rules out the job opportunity for you. So that constitutes a privilege because your belonging to this community, the Chinese community, and your ability to speak in your mother tongue gives you an advantage over everyone else.
It was obvious enough that all my co-workers are all Chinese, and them being them, right, they are actually more comfortable in their Mandarin language. So I had to blend in and try to understand what they are talking about. I mean, our common language here is English. Is it that hard to speak in English? I was there, but they began speaking in Mandarin, so I had to just laugh painfully at those particular jokes that they are making. But when I laughed, one of them would ask, do you understand? Or you understand meh? Like that. It was kind of rude. And at that point, I wanted to cry, and I don't know what to do, okay? I was really upset, so I just walked away from that. But of course, I didn't let the matter go. I just asked my manager to talk to them about it, because my manager is actually an American. So he talked to them about it lah. And well, it kind of go away for a while, but it just come back after a while. It should be, because you don't know who you might have hurt all this while. And I mean, whether intentionally or unintentionally, so certain phrases are actually quite sensitive to us.
I feel it's definitely of priority because the SAP schools are all the better schools. This particular school is an SAP school, and it is an autonomous school as well, which is the highest tier that a government school can go. If you look across the board, many of the SAP schools are big name schools, and as a result, they attract some of the best students in each cohort, and they also produce some of the best students when these students graduate from these schools. Problem here is this: these students have the network, they have the support, especially the teaching support. They also have more opportunities because of better funding and better facilities. So as a result, they are more likely to succeed in the working world, in the wider community, than their peers from less esteemed institutions. And that is a problem because you are giving them an unfair advantage. It is an advantage that they are able to make full use of because of their ethnicity, because of their ability to speak a certain language.
Rishi Budrani, someone well known in the media industry, expressed similar views. Mr. Budrani, a known member in Singapore's media industry, had posted on his Facebook about his meeting with a producer who asked him to act as a stereotypical character of his race. He talked about how he felt that humor based on racial stereotypes should not exist in modern day.
Okay, I don't know about sense of belonging. Maybe it is a sense of entitlement, perhaps. I don't know if there's anything but anecdotal evidence. I mean, what I've experienced 2 days ago on the plane, there was this Indian couple. I don't think they were Singaporean Indian. I don't know. Maybe they were non-Singaporean, but we were on the way back from Thailand. And I don't know, I couldn't say exactly, but I saw this Chinese family come in, Singaporean Chinese family, very obviously. And they very rudely said to these people, hey, this is not a theatre, no, you cannot anywhere sit down. What's your seat number? True enough, they have got the seat numbers wrong, but I don't think deliberately. But they just talked down to these fellas, and I was going to step in, but I was really far away. So by the time I got up, they had sorted it out already. It was just like very disgusting to see that behavior, and maybe they're isolated. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's an example I feel of like privilege. Looking down to people, pretending like the place is yours. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a sense of belonging, but I think it's more a sense of entitlement. Yeah, I mean, but I don't think it can be actively addressed in any way other than people voicing out their opinions and a little bit better education from a young age. But it's very hard when you are a minority trying to teach a majority how to behave with minority. The analogy I use is like it's a tricky thing to be able to talk to a room full of audience members, when you don't have a microphone, you are just using your normal speaking voice, and there's maybe at least maybe 200-300 of them in a room, and they all have microphones. So you're like, hello, excuse me, I'm trying to, it's very hard. But I guess the way to do it is that if more people without microphones, more people with their natural voices come out and talk about it, then maybe there will be a chance that one day we are able to slowly ease people into it and make changes. But there's a really long way before that happens.
However, some people say otherwise.
We can say that it can be addressed, but how can it be addressed? Because like you can see China is a growing economy, and like it's the companies that needs to really work with China in a sense, and plus Chinese is the majority population in Singapore, so like a lot of interactions have to go on in Chinese. So I mean, like if you're a Malay that can speak Chinese, then I definitely feel that he or she deserves a chance. But if you cannot speak Chinese, it's a bit difficult lah. No matter how much we want to change things, you know.
It's not as pressing of an issue as it is in like white superiority countries. Yeah, in Singapore it's quite generally still okay. It's not violent. Yeah.
So far, what I've experienced is very fair, spread throughout. I've worked in MNCs. We have people from diverse cultures, different countries, ranging from India all the way to Singapore. So yeah, I think everybody's being treated fairly as from what I've seen.
It's the same kind of country where there's a majority and there are minorities. Like this discussion we have, like see, when I talk about it, when it happens, like right now, I'm in a position to say no to something that I feel doesn't do anything for me, my career, or the community. But like if you look at USA, diversity is a big thing there. People are sometimes complaining about an all-white cast or how the minorities are underrepresented, and if they are represented, it's only in stereotypical roles. So this is not a new thing in Singapore. It is something that happens wherever there is a majority population and wherever there's a minority population. Yes, it does happen, and we have a long way to go before we can say that, hey, you know what, it's okay to have two Indian male and female lead in a local free-to-air TV show without it being written off by the producers going, hey, no lah, this one cannot lah. Who the hell would watch two Indian fellas on an English channel as a main role? But if there's two Chinese people, hey, okay what? Why cannot? Although it's an English show.
From our interviews, we garnered that most people are indeed aware of the existence of Chinese privilege in Singapore's society. However, there are many divided opinions on whether it truly is an issue of priority to be addressed. Of course, we are not a homogeneous society, and people are bound to have different views. Despite the many people that believe Chinese privilege is a prevalent issue in our society that needs to be addressed, there are also some that believe it isn't a pressing issue that needs to be addressed immediately, or that it isn't something that can be solved simply by addressing it. That being said, it is undeniable that Chinese privilege is a problem that has to be addressed. A problem, whether big or small compared to others, is still something we have to tackle instead of discouraging conversations about it.
Mostly like, job applications, like when you go on to apply, and then they always ask you if you know Mandarin or, only hiring Chinese.
When you had to say the pledge or national anthem in different languages, when it was Chinese, everyone had no problem with it. But the moment it came to like Tamil, everyone started laughing like it's a big joke. Like, okay, I'm sorry, my language is a joke to you. But yeah, I mean, the fact that your language doesn't get made fun of in Singapore, that's a privilege by itself already.
Yes, and it often comes in the form of assumptions and casual racism. Because students here are primarily Chinese, over 90%. In 6 years, I've seen 2 or 3 Indian students, maybe 5 or 6 Malay students, some of mixed parentage. But other than that, everyone else is Chinese, and like pure Chinese. Both their parents, both their grandparents are Chinese. So to them, being in this environment, they assume that this is Singapore. They assume that this is our wider community. They assume that everyone can speak Mandarin. And they will engage in casual racism either because of ignorance or because of being in such a homogeneous environment. So they forget that there may be things that they are saying that may be sensitive or outright rude to other communities, but they don't care. To them, it's accepted and it is the norm because they are in an environment where nobody finds it offensive, or at least hardly anyone, other than those among the teaching staff, especially those who are from minority races. But do the students see the problem? Unless I as a teacher or my colleagues point it out, they don't. So in that sense, it's a form of privilege because they get away with all these things. They're able to engage in all this behavior that is detrimental to the common good of the community.
From this, we learned that people have different opinions on whether Chinese privilege exists in Singapore or not. Some think that Chinese privilege does not exist, yet others feel that there is indeed such an issue in our country. Definitely, Chinese privilege cannot be compared to white privilege in America, where it has led to violent breakouts and riots. However, this doesn't cancel out or make Chinese privilege any less of an issue to tackle, as its existence in Singapore has brought along its own set of issues that needs to be addressed urgently. In Singapore, Chinese privilege is considered a taboo topic. Even when we were conducting our interviews, we encountered many people who weren't comfortable with talking about this topic. This is because Singapore prides itself on being a multiracial country. As Barack Obama once said, there are more than 600 million people who live in the ASEAN countries, and Singapore reflects an incredible diversity of faiths and ethnic groups and background and culture. To outsiders, it may seem like Singapore has no problems regarding our diverse race and cultures. But from this interview, it is prevalent that Singaporeans feel that the issue of Chinese privilege exists. In conclusion, our group believes that despite our progress over the years as a multiracial society, Singapore is nowhere near being a race-blind society. The only way to progress from here onwards is for all races to treat Chinese privilege as an issue to tackle together by voicing out and, more importantly, having empathy towards other races. For as long as we sit back and do nothing about it, Chinese privilege will always exist in Singapore.